Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. March Angular Mountain View Meetup. We've got some very fun things to do tonight, but first, as I always do, I'm going to go through a couple of announcements. If you haven't been following the news, cool things that are happening in the world of Angular. Just to kick us off, we have been working on Angular 1 and the material design components there for a long time. We've got a very rich, complete set. We've just started building that set for Angular 2, and we released a preview set of components so you can see how fast, how they're designed, how the APIs are working out. You can go check it out on our blog. We've got a nice article about it. Also talking about how this version relates to the Angular 1 version, how we're going to continue supporting Angular 1. Second thing up, we've been working on a bunch of new cool features inside Angular 2, and one of them is this new router, or router, depending on your locale. And one of our promises we made is that we're going to make some of the tech in Angular 2 available inside Angular 1, both just to up-level your Angular 1, but also as a nice bridge to get onto Angular 2. And so we have this working for Angular 1 now, and there's some nice docs out on the Angular 1 site. You could look at taking advantage of this in your Angular 1 apps now. On Angular 2, to help people get going, we've got kind of 3 levels of documentation now. So we have the API docs, low-level stuff. Maybe you actually never need to refer to it. We've got these great developer guides that starts with a tutorial, and then we get into all of the concepts. And just this month, we've started these cookbooks, which is kind of the idea of I need to do X. Just give me a code snippet I can paste in and get going from there. And we have just a few, but one of the really interesting ones is the mapping of what do I know in Angular 1? How do I do exactly that thing in Angular 2? So if you're an Angular 1 developer now and you want to get going in Angular 2, this is a really nice reference for you to get going. There's some other pieces to it as well for doing things like data-driven forms and communicating between components. And there's a bunch of other pieces that we have planned that are coming down the pipe soon. Last bit, there's a talk that we did at Fluent Conference this month, just like 2 weeks ago. And I recommend it highly because I gave it, so it's pretty good. And you can go check it out on the Fluent website. And the things you'll find in there are really what we're laying out for the rest of the year in Angular 2. All of the cool capabilities, all of the target platforms, like talk about how fast it is and some recent improvements that we've made. So go check it out on the O'Reilly site. Thanks for listening. I'm going to hand it over to Jeff now. And David also going to come up and talk about. Oh, you do Rob now. All right, good. Good. Well, we'll switch the slide decks then.
Rob is going to come talk about SystemJS and explain the mysteries. Has anyone used SystemJS, the loader, the builder? Has anyone been confused by it before? I spend days on it sometimes figuring out the configuration.
That's the reason I got hired, right?
Yeah, so yeah, Rob was hired as a consultant to help us decipher it.
So I'm just going to do a little bit of live coding here. So one of the things that we do in the docs for Angular 2 is we have a quick start that goes through using the Angular 2 bundled code and kind of getting you up and running really, really quickly. So one of the things that's really hard is if you've done the quick start, kind of going from using this bundled code to how do I actually build an Angular application? How do I run my build tooling? How do I bundle it? That kind of stuff. So I'm just going to see if I can, in 5 or 6 minutes here, set up kind of the basic setup. If you're on Gitter, this question comes up a lot, and I sort of explain it 10 times a day. So I thought we'd probably get it on video and show everybody here once, just kind of how to go through this setup, because there's a lot of kind of little gotchas as you're getting started the first time. So I'll run through that. This will get better over time, but this is just to sort of get everybody up and running if you want to do it for the first time. Right? So I'm just going to start with a new directory here. We'll call this our meetup test app. Maker. Not a good start, right? So we'll switch in there, and we're going to do, because we're going to use npm for this, we're going to do an npm install Angular 2. So this is kind of where you would start every time. When you do this, great, it's going to run, internet's fast, right? First thing you're going to see anytime you do this is this sort of set of unmet peer dependencies, right? So Angular 2 depends on a couple of things, and because we're using npm 3, and this is new if you've not used npm 3 before, we don't install these peer dependencies by default. So you'll see this error message the first time if you don't kind of install them all together. So I'm just going to cheat here. I'm going to grab them real quick. We'll do an npm All these, oops, not that, because that's an error message. npm install. We're going to do ES6 promise. Why never live codes? It's not a good idea, right? Let's just type it in. ES6 promise at 3.0.2. We want ES6 shim at 0. So this is like what it's really like in the real world to do this, right? Everybody watching you, so we'll reflect. Metadata. So these are the basic kind of Angular dependencies at 0.1.2 and RxJS. RxJS is the kind of only core dependency we have. So we'll throw that in there, beta.2, and then zone.js at 0.6.4. Anybody gonna catch any errors that I've done already? Anybody see anything wrong? Cross your fingers. Cool, so we'll run that, nice and fast internet, and that works well. So good, so now we've got no errors, which means we've got all the dependencies we need here to get up and running, right? So we're gonna use TypeScript because TypeScript is really nice for this kind of stuff. So I've got TypeScript installed globally already. This is TSC, got a bunch of inits here. So I can do TSC inits, and that's gonna create for me a TypeScript configuration file, right? And then what I will do is go ahead and open this up in my editor. And so tsconfig, wow, that's tiny. I got a tsconfig file here. Tsconfig is just like a setting settings to use the TypeScript compiler. So the basic ones kind of work well. So common.js is we're going to output for this demo. We're going to compile to ES5. Node implicit any. This is really good if you're doing strongly typed stuff. I'm not going to do it because I will inevitably screw it up on stage. So I'm going to leave that as it is. We're going to add a couple more options here. So we're going to add this emit decorator metadata. This allows TypeScript to use a couple of advanced features. So we're going to set that to true. And then we're also going to say experimental decorators true as well. So this is kind of a couple of advanced features that Angular uses that we're going to use in our app. The default tsconfig here typically starts with this exclude. I recommend when you do this actually to change this over. Instead of using exclude, we're going to use files. So files, instead of saying like ignore everything except this, we're going to say only include the stuff that I'm going to tell you to include. One of the kind of common misconceptions, and this is really nice, is that actually we don't have to tell TS everything we're going to use, right? So if you have an app of 500 files, you don't have to tell it every single file. Because we're using ES6 modules here, it actually allows us to sort of just give it our entry point, and it will track everything down on its own, right? So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder in here. I'm going to call this source. And I'm going to, in there, add a new file. We're going to call that our main.ts. And then in my tsconfig, I'm just going to say, I want you to build source.main. And this is the actual only source file I have to add in here. It's not going to make us track everything down. And the last thing I'm going to get in here, just don't forget, is our our output directory. And we're going to say to dist. So it just means we're going to take our TypeScript code, we're going to compile it from source to dist. And that'll get created as we go here. So if I just add a little bit of code here, we'll do console log hello world. Great. So it's important up until this point, everything that I'm doing here is kind of server side, right? Like there's nothing running in the browser here. And one of the things to be clear on is that when you're building an Angular 2 app, typically you've got kind of two steps and two things going on. There's your compilation step, that is taking your TypeScript code and turning it into JavaScript. And then your actual runtime stuff, so taking that JavaScript and running it in the browser. And I think a lot of people get tangled up. I certainly got tangled up the first few times I ran through this. So this is the kind of the first step. So this is getting your code to compile, right? So now if I run TSC, hopefully it's not going to give me any errors. Nice. What you can see is it's taken that main.ts file and turned it into executable JavaScript, right? So we actually want to run this, right? We want to do something with this code in the browser, or actually in the browser. So I'm going to npm install SystemJS. And SystemJS is a module loader. Our quick start uses this. It just allows us to load modules without doing any bundling. So I'll do that first here. While that's doing its thing, I will go ahead and create a index.html file. Index.html. Super exciting watching me live code, I know. We're trying to be real world about this. We'll do hello world in here. And so that has installed, and we will go ahead and start a little local server here for us. Python-n simple server. Yes. Is that running? What did I start that on? 8,000. Oh, this is server. Let's not do that, huh? Broken everything. Demos. This is what it's really like sometimes to be a developer, right? Yeah, test app. Cool. So Python-m simple. I'll joke while I'm doing this, Jeff. That's all right. We'll do this on 8081. Yeah, right. Screws up all live coding. So just so you know, I was building a service worker app this afternoon using offline capability. So that's what's happening there. My service worker app has taken over my actual app. Ah, cool. So hello world. Thanks, everybody. So this is like up until, this is easy, right? Up until now. And this is where everybody goes a little bit crazy, right? So we're going to now use the system loader here. And we're going to include node. I'm going to have to look at my actual screen while I'm typing rather than that one. Systemjs/dist/system.js. Groovy. And so every document you see is going to say something like, let's system.import our app. So if I do this, everything's going to explode. It's all going horribly wrong, right? So the first thing we want to do, and so here's the kind of the big difference, and this is why SystemJS confuses everybody, right? Is that Webpack tooling that you've used before, it runs on the server, right? So it can understand your code. It can look through your directory, stuff like that. SystemJS runs only in the browser. So it has no idea about anything that's going on. It doesn't know where to find anything. It doesn't know where anything actually lives on disk, right? So we have to configure SystemJS to do what we want it to do. So the first thing we always have to do is kind of two things you need to know about system, right? So the first is map. And map is when I ask for something, this is where we go to look for it. So in this case, we're going to do two things. So I'm going to map my app to my dist directory. And what that means is that when I ask for app, right, go find it here on disk. And this means that it doesn't have to know anything about where it is on the server because I'm telling it everything here, right? So got our main in there. And the second part of SystemJS you need to know is packages. So packages are a way of describing little bundles of code, right? A package is a package. And ours, we're going to configure our app package. I'm going to try to configure our app package. And there's two things you need to know about this. So the first is, what's the main file? Like when we ask for app, what's the package we want to start at, right? So we're going to say main is index.js. Not index.js, main.js. My system config is hard. And then the tricky thing here is we're going to use default extension. And this will become clear in just a second as to why. So again, what I'm saying here is I'm going to configure my loader to, when I ask for app or any dependencies, look in the dist directory. And the package itself is configured, so I only have to ask for app and not app/main or anything like that. And then the default extension. So when I ask app here, it's going to add the .js on the end, right? So hopefully now should see hello world, hooray. Everybody clap, please, for that working. Cool. So now let's do a bit of Angular. So I've already installed Angular 2, which is good. So now I can just say import component. What? Thank you. Why, you are my boss. That's right. So we're going to say import components from Angular 2/core. You can see, because we're using TypeScript here, knows what this is. I can look for other stuff. So like, I don't know, view, right? All this other stuff comes up. I'm gonna have to do that though. And I also want to import bootstrap. So this is gonna boot the app from Angular 2 /platform/browser. Is that right? Angular 2 / that's secret. We can't talk about Angular 3 yet. Cool. So I'm going to create a quick component here. We'll call this our selector. Let's use type complete because that's awesome. We'll call this our demo app. And we'll add a little bit of a template here that's like div, hello name. A very technical Angular 2 app that we're building here. We're going to then create our components. So we'll say like export class demo app. Cool. Bootstrap. Our app, right? So we've created a component, our demo app. So you'd think, awesome, this is going to work, but guaranteed it's going to explode. Here's why. So this is the kind of the first most, second, third, fourth, fifth most confusing one here. So, oh my God, bunch of errors, right? So Angular 2 is written in TypeScript, which means it's effectively written in ES6. And so we're using some ES6 features inside of Angular 2. So stuff like map here and promise. So promise is actually in your browser probably by now, but it's actually an ES6 feature. It's not part of ES5. So TypeScript is trying to take our ES6 code and turn it into ES5. And it's saying like, I don't know anything about what you're giving me here. So luckily TypeScript comes with TypeScript has a kind of like a sister project called Typings. And Typings provides a set of these little sort of typings files, extra information about the code we're writing, right? So I've done typings in it, which has created, hopefully, has created a typings file here for us. So this is a bit like tsconfig for extra information. And then I can say typings install ES6 shim. So this is extra ES6 dependencies. And I'm going to say ambient. And what this means is because ES6 is something that would exist in your browser, like it's not something you install from NPM. ES6 is in your environment, right? It's ambient. And I can say save on this. And it'll ask me a couple of questions. It'll say, hopefully, no, it didn't ask me any questions. Good. So cool. So it's installed the ES6 shim. And if we now look in typings, you can see that we've got a couple of things. We've got this browser, which is like a root entry point, and then the actual typings for ES6 shim live in here. And so what we're going to say is this browser basically references all the things that we install. So now can go into our tsconfig, and we can say basically we want to compile our main, but you also want to compile that browser.d.ts file alongside. So we're just saying basically like use the information I'm going to pass you to compile, and hopefully now everybody cross your fingers, please. TSC, no errors, Ruby. Yay. So great, it's going to work, right? Just kidding. No, it's not. So let's start our server back up for a start. It's going to work. It's not. Here's why. So again, we're using Angular 2, right? We're using stuff that's on disk somewhere, and system doesn't know anything about it. So we get to do a little bit more configuration. We're going to go into our system.config, and we're going to do two more things, right? So the first is we're going to use Angular 2, and this lives in node modules. And again, we're saying like, don't give you any specific files, just like go start looking for it here. And Angular 2 also uses RxJS, so we're going to do the same. We're going to do node modules RxJS, and then again, we're going to do packages Angular 2. Angular 2 doesn't have a main file, so we don't have to configure that, but it does use default extension JS. And again, because we're using the stuff that's coming off of NPM, we're not using .ts here. We're not using the TypeScript files from Angular 2. We're using the JavaScript in the browser, and the compiler, the TSC stuff we're using in the command line is actually what's using the TypeScript information. SystemJS doesn't know anything about TypeScript, doesn't care about it. It just cares about JavaScript. So I got a default extension there, and also for RxJS. Yes. It does have a main file, but we don't really care about it. So we're going to say default extension JS on this. Don't need to recompile because this is all sort of configurable stuff, right? And with any luck, not yet. So last thing, this is one I always forget. So Angular 2 uses a couple advanced features. We use reflect and zones. So rather than bringing those in as modules, because they need to be polyfilled in the browser, we're going to do one last thing here, and that is say node modules, Angular 2, Angular 2, Angular 42. That's like way, way more secret than Angular 3. Angular 2 bundles, Angular 2 polyfills. We edit this at the end, yeah, polyfills.js, cool. So now, okay, so we're almost there. Here's the important thing. Angular's booted, right? So we're not getting any network errors, no 404s, right? Anybody know what I'm missing here? Not Jeff? Oh, right. I've told Angular to boot, right? But I haven't actually told it where to boot yet. So instead of using our body tag here, we can do our demo app. And let's just go back for effect and say, hello, constructor. Say name is a string, and this dot name equals meetup. Great. So let's just compile one more time. Start our server. Everybody cross your fingers. Yes. Oh my God. So, point of this is a real world kind of situation. This is how you would actually run an Angular app, right? You would actually install these packages of NPM, you would do your TypeScript compilation. As you can see, that's a little bit dramatic. There's a little stuff to do there. You can do it today. One of the things we want to do with our command line is automate a lot of this stuff, right? But one of the problems when we do automation, when we do kind of these quick starts, is it's really difficult to see what's actually happening, right? So this is the kind of real world development process for you, how you do most stuff, right? You do an NPM install, you do a compile, you kind of set it up. But that's it. Like that's the really kind of basic quick start. I'm on Gitter all the time, so you will inevitably run into problems with the system. Just gets really complicated. It's really kind of bleeding edge. We're making it better. We're working with Guy to kind of make this a more improved process. Our CLI will do it. But if you have questions, I'm on Gitter at Rob Wormald, and please come and talk to me, and I will help you out. End of my talk.
All right, that was awesome. Patrick JS, we're going to welcome you to the stage now. I've forgotten Patrick's real name by now. You've probably seen him around by Patrick JS. Is that your Twitter? Your Twitter is like GDI 2290, but his initials are actually Patrick JS. Stapleton.
Yeah, John Stapleton.
John Stapleton. Okay. Patrick's going to talk about hot reloading with Angular 2.
All right, so I'm going to show you hot module replacement and just a way to improve your developer workflow with this new thing that hacked into my starter. So if you don't know, I created the Angular 2 Webpack starter. It's like the most popular Angular 2 starter that uses Webpack, not SystemJS. So one of the features of Webpack is being able to have like live reloading whenever you edit your changes. So you can watch your files, then you can utilize the Webpack dev server. So we're doing that here, and we can see that this is our, basically our application. And whenever I hit save, you can see that on the right, it's compiling the application and then refreshing the page, right? So that's great. But what I'm going to show you is essentially, so like, say that, you're editing your application, you're testing it, and this value essentially just puts inside of the store, just for this demonstration purposes. And then you want to edit this again, some like styling change or whatever. Hold on, I killed the server. Let's not kill the server in the demo. So like, say that you're working on your application, you're testing it, and then you essentially make an edit. The whole page is going to refresh. Because you have the live reloading. So now the feature that I implemented was hooking into a lot of the hot module replacement that Webpack provides and allowing us to persist the data as well as reloading inside the browser as opposed to refreshing. So if I switch servers to allow for hot module reloading, Wait for it to build. All right, cool. Now you can see that whenever I'm typing in something, and then I edit the page, well, actually, yeah, you can see that the data is persisted here. If you may now say that one. So like, again, hit enter. Hello, and then we can see it appears without the whole page refreshing. Now this is a pretty nice workflow because you don't see the whole loading screen again. So like if previously we were seeing this loading screen because we have a single page app, but it's even more so interesting when you introduce long lists. So say that we have this long list here, and we're scrolled down to the bottom, and we're making a UI change at the bottom here. So we're going to add something here. And we can see on the right that it appears without refreshing and without having to scroll. So look, let's go back to the previous experience with the same exact long list. Okay, so we scroll back down, see hello world, remove that, save it, and we can see that it's refreshing. Then we have to scroll back down again. So essentially, this is Angular 2 HMR modules that I created just last night. So, or a few nights ago. So like you guys could play around with it. Basically, there's a few caveats, like you have to wrap your bootstrap in a function that takes the initial state. And if you're using something like NGRX or something or any other store, you essentially have the initial state here. So when you bootstrap, you're able to pass that to your services. And you essentially just invoke this function with the main bootstrap function, as well as the module itself. And this essentially bootstraps your application on the client in a hidden element. While basically, whenever you make a change, it's going to get the change. Webpack is going to handle that, and then bootstrap the application in a hidden element. And when that's done, we're going to dispose the current application and reveal the replaced one. And that's essentially how we get the seamless experience without any like styles or whatever. It's all here. It all works. And that's kind of how like we can improve the developer experience by taking advantage of hot module replacement. Yeah.
Is it in the Webpack Starter?
Yeah, it's in the Webpack Starter. So it's just you have to use Webpack, not SystemJS. You have to use Angular 2 HMR, and then yeah, pretty much it. Or just use a starter. So yeah.
Thank you, Patrick. Now we're going to kick off the main event. The two you came here to see, me and David East. All right, no laughs for that. Okay. I'm Jeff Cross from the Angular team.
I'm David East from the Firebase team. And together, we work on AngularFire for Angular 2.
Thank you. We just gave an epic high five for whoever's watching the recording later and doesn't see the video feed.
For you.
So
there's also other contributors.
Yeah, so we did all the work, but these other people kind of tagged along.
Yeah. Rob Wormald with his two-character
commit on every repository. So thank you for that. Hey, where am I on this list?
I put the.
Oh, you cropped us out because it's just like dwarfs everyone else's contributions.
Yeah. Yeah. So who here has used Firebase before? So good amount of hands. So tonight we're going to talk about AngularFire for Angular 2 and a lot of the new stuff in Angular 2 and how it makes that easier. But who here who has used Angular, who used Firebase, used the AngularFire library? So less people. So good. We have some stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's gonna
lots of opportunity.
So Firebase essentially comes with 3 features. You can log a user in, so you don't need to write any OAuth code, just does it for you. And then once that user's logged in, you can save data against that user. And then once you're done building your app, you can ship it out using the static hosting. So it's a whole pipeline for getting your app done into production. And so tonight we're going to talk about how we built AngularFire for Angular 1 and look at the things that we sort of had to do for that, and then kind of then see the new tools in Angular 2 and how that kind of helps us make it.
Whoa. Angular 2.
Yeah.
We haven't announced Angular 2 yet.
We did. It's like a year ago.
Yeah, we're good.
I actually.
When were you going to tell me about this?
I'm sorry, Jeff.
Yeah.
I told David I thought he'd tell you.
Oh, so yeah, we've been working on this thing called Angular 2 for a while.
Really wow.
I guess we'll give you an intro to it tonight. So this will be the first time you can see that.
Okay.
And then we, in addition to that, I've been working on a new library called AngularFire 2, which we'll do some live coding demonstration of later.
Yes.
So lots of big announcements tonight.
Not announcements.
Okay.
Well-known things. So AngularFire for Angular 1.x. There is a Firebase library, we call it the Firebase SDK, and when we first made it, we kind of started just wrapping all the methods for Angular, and then we kind of realized like, that's not useful. So we went and actually looked at the problems developers were having, the same things people were doing over and over again, and we turned our library into that, and it ended up being a lot more useful for everyone. And so what we found out that what we wanted to handle was synchronized collections like objects and arrays, and then dealing with authentication and like having route-based security and stuff like that, and just taking care of that for you, and you just sort of plug it in as you need it. So the way it kind of works is your typical Angular 1 app. You import the Firebase module. You can then inject the different types of synchronization. So I'm injecting Firebase array here, and then I can do a regular Firebase SDK method where I can create a new Firebase that connects out to my Firebase. And then at that point, I can then use that reference in the Firebase array function, which creates a real-time synchronized array. And then the cool thing about that is just in that one line of code that looks synchronous, it's actually an asynchronous method that keeps this array updated in real time, triggers the digest loop whenever anything changes, and keeps your view in date, or up to date in that one line of code. So this worked out really well. We had a lot of traction on it. We worked really hard on trying to make it as simple as possible. So the question was, like, why don't we just create the same API for Angular 2?
Which I actually tried to do.
This is true.
When David asked me to start helping with the library, I just copy-pasted over, and but things didn't quite work. And he had already tried it before, which I didn't realize. And so we had to figure out how to reapply AngularFire ideas with new Angular 2 ideas.
Yes, so Angular 2 has a brand new set of tools. So when you start making Angular 2 apps, you want to think about the new stuff that's available for you to use. So you're not kind of just writing Angular 1 code in Angular 2 style, because you're going to end up hurting yourself more in the long run. So tonight we're going to talk about the new stuff that is out there and how we used it to help start building this library. So the first tool is pretty...
Whoa. This is another announcement I need to make.
No, it's not.
I'm pleased to announce tonight that the Angular team has partnered with the TypeScript team from Microsoft to build Angular 2 in TypeScript, and also build a nice experience for all of our users with TypeScript.
Okay.
That would be more excitement than that. So what does TypeScript give us?
So TypeScript gives you discoverability and confidence when you're building your app. So this is, again, an AngularFire 1, where we're injecting the same Firebase array. But then when we actually start using methods on this, we don't really know what's there. We're kind of like, well, I read the docs, so I kind of know that I can call this $loaded method, which helps let you know when your initial data set has loaded. And then from there, maybe if I want to get the first person from the array, I can tap into the array and type .name. But all that is just sort of like crossing your fingers and hoping that data never changes. And and usually what I do is just do this. I have like actually on the left side, and then what I'm doing is the docs on the right. And so I'm like, okay, and I can keep going along. But with AngularFire 2 is no.
So what do we do about it? Tonight, I'm pleased to announce a new library called AngularFire 2.
It's literally the title of our talk.
Okay. Well, they might not have known what it was.
So when you're using an Angular 2 class, you can just inject AngularFire, and then when you say AF dots, you get a whole list. This is the 3 things we have now. We'll have more later, but these are what you get. And so what's kind of great is when you could type auth, it'll give you the methods for auth, the same for list. You can know with confidence in like what you actually get on when you use the AngularFire service. So you don't have to dock the docs, right next to you, or run it and cross fingers that you're not,
There's only 3 methods right now, so it's a pretty simple
so
library.
pretty good right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's what we want to do. We wanted to actually redesign for actually discoverability, to have a main entry point, to be able to tap into that main class and see what's available. The tool number 2 is zones.
Really, David?
Oh,
I got this.
okay.
I'm pleased to announce a new library, a new idea invented by Angular. Actually, Dart invented this based on lots of other prior art. But it's called Zones, and it's in stage 0 of the JavaScript language standard with TC39, the standards committee.
Okay, so who here has used zones before or heard of zones who does not work on the Angular team? Okay, we got a couple people.
You used it outside of Angular? Okay, but you're not on the Angular team. That was the
okay.
Okay.
Two hands, we're good. All right, so zones are a way for you to intercept asynchronous operations. So it's kind of like an asynchronous call stack. So as things happen asynchronously, you can still keep a nice chain of events of what actually happened. But we're actually not going to totally focus on how zones work. We're actually going to focus more on how zones affect you. So this is your typical Angular 1 app, and we're actually just using the regular Firebase library. We're not going to use AngularFire. So we connect out to Firebase, and then we're going to listen for when children are added. And when these children are added, we're just going to push them on to the array. And then
David, that's not going to work.
that's what I was just about to tell them.
It's not going to update the view because
this is an
async operation here.
Yes, that's exactly what I was about to say.
All right, just making sure you knew.
Okay, so as Jeff so astutely just pointed out, that's not going to work because Firebase is an external library. Angular has no idea when these asynchronous operations update. So what we can do is we can inject timeout, and then on the next tip, trigger the digest loop, and update the page. And that's not a lot of fun to do, especially manually keep track of yourself, and it leads to some pretty nasty code.
And it is prone to lots of subsequent digests, which is a performance issue if you have lots of, what do we call them? Like binding? Like,
you work on the team,
we call
man.
it dirty checking bug. What do we call each instance? Oh, you need to fix your mic.
It's just broken. Okay.
There's a handheld mic up there.
Yes.
But anyway, this was a big performance issue in Angular 1. Like people would have async operations that were in third-party libraries outside of Angular, and they would just like do a bunch of manual digests. And so digest after digest after digest would.
Have you ever received the max digest loop error? Like every hand should be raised. This is like, hey, you want to do that? Do this. But so that is what it's essentially when you live life without zones. When you live life with zones, this in Angular 2, this is the same code and it works. And what's really great about this is the fact that we don't have to care about any asynchronous operations. So Angular works with zones, and zone lets Angular know when some asynchronous event has happened, and then it tells it to update change detection, which is super great because I don't have to worry about like whatever happens on the next tick, triggering digest or anything like that. And it also handles a lot of the performance for me. So what that really means is that, how does zone work? Well, it doesn't really matter how it works because, well, unless you're writing a library, you have to care. But if you're not writing a library, you can write all of your asynchronous code without worrying about Angular's internals, which is, the way it should be. So the last one is tool number 3, observable.
I got this.
So raise your hand if you.
I got this.
Okay.
I'm pleased to announce that we have partnered with the ReactiveX community and the RxJS project to bring RxJS observables as a first-class async primitive for Angular 2. David, can you tell us what an observable is?
I could. But all right, so who here has used
Wait,
observables?
wait, let's have Rob Wormald come up and
Yeah,
tell
Rob.
what an observable is.
We put the disclaimer.
Let's hear it for Rob Wormald, developer advocate for Angular.
An observable is like a promise, and it's like an array. So so like a promise, you say, give me some data, it will come back and it will give you the data once, right? An observable is like that, except that it will give you one or many values. So I'm not going to take away like what you guys are going to talk about, right? But think of it like a promise, except that it gives you many values. So it's like an array that way. This is going to make way more sense when they actually explain this. Yeah, you guys are going to do that?
Yeah, that was good.
Okay.
So if you have any, after this presentation, if you have any questions, you're really confused about observables, he would love to field any frustrations, questions, comments, or anything. He gave you all his contact information. It's his Twitter handle up there.
Note there's only one W in his name, not Wormwald, like most people spell it.
Yeah. So just ping him for any frustrations you may have around observables. So with observables, let's take a look at this data structure. This is just a big JSON object. And so this is sort of like a problem that you might have if you're structuring your data in the Firebase database. It's all structured as JSON. So we have a node that is a list of users, user 1, user 2, and then each user has a list of to-dos. So user 1, I have to ship AngularFire 2, and Jeff has to ship Angular 2. And so this is, a nice flattened way to store your data. You don't have to tap into, all of the users' to-dos every time you just want one user. But when we want to display this data on the page, we want it to look like this. We want it in an array, and then we want the user's name and the list of to-dos. So this way we could create a variable, var David is users of 0, and then say David.todos. That's the nice way of doing it. But as you saw, they're actually on 2 separate nodes, which will require 2 asynchronous calls. And then we have to map each one of the to-do lists to each user, which, if you're confused, you should be. So in AngularFire 2, I'm not even going to show you how we do it in Angular 1 or AngularFire 1 because it's definitely a little more complicated. But observables actually make this really easy. So you can see right here, we're using AngularFire.list, which will create a synchronized array, but an observable form. So what we can do is we can actually say map, just like as we would over an array, and this will unwrap the observable, much as you would unwrap a promise. And then this returns to you the list of people, so all the users. And then this is a real array, so I can also, again, map over it and get each person. And then now that I've gotten this person, I can say person.todos is another observable. And then that will go out and retrieve all of the to-dos. And then I just return the person because it's in the map. And then that creates that JSON structure that I needed. And it's like completely and like just all done through observables. This is all RxJS. It's pretty simple. And it returns to me that same object that I needed. And I can still store my data flattened how I want to in the Firebase database. So essentially, a really complicated way of talking about observables is to compose multiple async operations. So if anyone ever in a job interview or anything asks you what observables are, you're like, oh yes, it's how you compose multiple async operations. And then they'll be like, yes, when can you start? So if you are super excited, you are going to be totally excited for Jeff live coding this. Mm-hmm. I am. Mm-hmm. So let's get started.
I've never live coded in a talk before, so.
Nothing usually goes wrong.
It's good? All right. Wait, didn't you just? Oh, okay. Well, I started with an app already using Angular CLI. Rob alluded to the CLI tool we're building to make it a little bit less tedious to build apps. So I already created an app with that. I just did like ng new, and I called the app Please Work. It's a to-do app, but it's like a project manager's to-do app. So they just give people work to do. And so what I have right now, what's been generated for me by the CLI is everything here. It's given me a source directory with my app in it. Actually, let me refresh this. Okay, so I have my app here, my main component where I do the main app where I do the bootstrap, and my main app component here. It gives me this default component set up with some silly things. And And then I can serve this by doing ng serve. And it builds it. And then if I go to my browser, I can see it on the left. So, okay. So I've done a little bit more than the CLI does by going ahead and installing AngularFire 2 and configuring it to be built. So let's actually go ahead and get started on how we would start with an app with AngularFire 2. I'll open my app.ts again. So in Angular 2, we have this bootstrap function that basically sets up our apps. It takes the root component of our app, and it also takes an array of providers to help get dependency injection configured. And one convention for libraries is to export common providers that we can include in our bootstrap process. And in the AngularFire library, it's called Firebase providers.
Show them that part right there. Now do that. Go back to the import.
You want to see something cool? So since we use TypeScript, TypeScript is able to understand ES6 modules and look at what it exports. So if I put the module there, then I just over here start typing something. Of course, now it's not going to do it.
Oh.
I think my something's slowing down my computer. There we go. It's like, here are all these things you could import. And I just choose that one. And then right here, I put it in my list. And that way, the things that AngularFire exports will be injectable through my application. There are a couple other things while I'm here I'm going to go ahead and set up. One thing is we have a utility called default Firebase. It's just a function that lets you specify a default Firebase for your app to connect with. So anytime you inject the AngularFire service, it will, the list method, like you saw in David's examples, will reference this as the base URL and just make those paths relative to this. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to my Firebase. And so that will just create a provider with Angular 2's dependency injection so that I can inject that anywhere in my app. And the other thing I want to go ahead and set up is our login. So we have a convenience method to configure login so that anywhere I want to log in, I can just call login on the AngularFire auth service without having to pass my configuration around. And then I'll get a couple of TypeScript enums so I can configure that login method. So we're going to log in with GitHub in our app. So I'll just call Firebase auth config with method. I'm going to do a pop-up. So this will pop up a window to log in. And since it's a TypeScript enum, I just scroll down and select that from the list. And then provider, we'll say auth providers dot GitHub. You see, it gives me all that completion because we've defined all of these options ahead of time.
And so this is essentially like creating a Angular 1 provider, right? Just kind of setting things up.
Service.
Yeah. Factory service provider.
Yeah, factory service provider. So there's all we need to do here, and we can actually close this file and never come back to it. I should go back here and things should still be working. Our console should be clear. There's some random error, but pay no attention to that error. All right, so now we've got that configured. Let's just go into our main app component. And the first thing we want to do is implement login. So to do that, I'm just going to delete this stuff that was generated here. There's one important thing we forgot to do. David, do you know what that is?
Delete the tests.
Delete the test because nobody needs tests.
When you see a .spec,
Mishko's not here, right?
yeah,
So,
Mishko.
yeah.
When you see a .spec, what do?
Delete it.
Delete it.
Don't look back. We're kidding, of course. Tests are good. We're just not going to write them tonight. Okay, so all right, in my app, so I want to go ahead and add login to this main component. And inside of my component on the left, actually, there's not much I'm going to do other than inject the AngularFire service. Here, let's try this again. AngularFire 2. And then on the right here, whoa. All right. So in my constructor, I'm just going to, that's hard to type at this angle. I'm just going to inject AngularFire to the service. And so with Angular 2, one of the ways we leverage TypeScript is that in your constructor arguments, if you type an argument, like if you're in your component or service constructors, then DI will, dependency injection will actually look at the type of that and use that to know what to inject. So by just doing this, dependency injection will automatically give me the AngularFire service. Let me, and a nice feature of TypeScript is I can just use this public keyword in the constructor arguments, and it'll automatically assign that to this.af inside my class. So now we've got the AngularFire service attached to my component as a public property. That's really all we need to do in this component, and I'm going to do the rest of the work inside the template. We'll keep it simple right now. We won't create a new component for login, but we'll add some things at the top of the page to show different messages if the user's logged in or not. So we use ngIf, and this is just like ngIf in Angular 1, except we have a star. This just in Angular 2 just means something that is a structural directive or something that changes the structure of the view. So since ngIf is destructive, it creates or destroys elements, it's got a star in front of it. And we'll give an expression that says angular.auth async. Now this might look a little bit weird. What I'm doing here is I'm getting a hold of the public AngularFire service, and then I'm looking at the auth property of it. And the auth property of AngularFire is actually an observable. And so what it gives us is anytime the auth state changes for this user, it will emit the new auth data value. So if they're not logged in, it just emits null. And so when it's null, then this will not be created. This will just be destroyed. But what's happening on the right side of this expression is called a pipe. And I'm actually going to close the component so we can see this better. So a pipe looks kind of like a filter in Angular 1, but it's actually kind of like a filter, but more powerful.
It's like if a filter did steroids and went to Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or any other form of higher education.
Yeah. So it's like a filter, but it can do things like the async pipe, for example, will unwrap values. So if it gets a promise or an observable on the left side, it will then take whatever value is emitted from that promise or observable and return it, so that if I actually wrap this in in parentheses here, then if the value had a property like UID, then I could get a hold of the UID here, even though auth is actually an observable. That'll make a little bit more sense as I get further into the demo, because we use this pipe a lot. So anyway, right here, I'm saying if the auth has a value, so pipe it into async, and if that has a value, then render this element. I'll go ahead and get rid of those parentheses. And so this will be if they're logged in, and I'll just go ahead and say logged in as, and then again, I'll pipe to async to unwrap the value. And since we're logging in with GitHub, our auth object has a GitHub property, which has a username field. We'll add the logo up here. Please work. All right. So then we'll add another ngIf here, and we'll just say the opposite. If null, then we'll just have a button to log in. And actually, let's put while we're up here, we'll put a log out button. So to log in, we're going to use another nifty feature of AngularFire. And we'll just say af.auth.login. And since we configured everything already in our Bootstrap when we were configuring our providers, we don't need to pass any information here because it knows to log in with a pop-up with the GitHub provider. So if you're not familiar with Angular 2, this is our template syntax to bind to events. So this means for any click events on this button, do the thing on the right. So now I should, when I go back here, I see a nicely styled login button.
Is that material design spec?
Yeah, this is one of the new material components.
Okay.
High quality, using some new fancy fonts. Yeah, it's responsive. See, I'll resize. It maintains.
Is that Times New Roman?
Yeah, this is the new Times New Roman font available from Google Fonts.
Okay.
The download is worth it. So anyway, before I was rudely interrupted. So if I click login, I've already logged in with GitHub previously. So, and then I can log out.
You can't. It's not a bug, it's a feature.
Right. Glad you caught that. can't log out until I do this. I expect another round of applause when this works. Oops.
Oh.
Good job. Good job, everybody. All right. You ready? Anyone think it won't work? Boom. Standing ovation. All right. All right, I'll log back in, though. Okay. So since we're using the observable here, we don't really have to do much other than just listen to it and let ngif do its thing. All right, so we've got login, but let's make it where we can actually create some to-dos. And since it's a project manager, it's not just one person's to-dos. Let's start with having some people in the app. So we'll create a new component using Angular CLI. We'll call it people. And so we'll just have a list of people, and then under those people we'll have what they're supposed to be doing, right? All right, so it creates 4 things for me, 3 things of which I'll keep. It's got the CSS, the HTML, the spec.
What do you do with the spec?
What do we do with the spec? Delete it.
Make sure you start your CLI.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're going to precaution kill that CLI process and then delete this file. Even though I could have just left it there. All right. Okay, building happy again. So we've got this new component. Before we move on to that component, I'm going to make it a route inside of my main app component. So we've got this route config here. This is how we tell Angular within this component, here's how to handle subroutes. And my computer's starting to slow down. Fast. So in the route config, so this route config just takes a list of configuration objects telling Angular how to route within this component. We'll say / to make it a default, and we'll tell it the component is people. But this should give me a squiggly line. Actually, I'm going to kill Visual Studio Code and open it again because it's starting to slow down. The CLI is in alpha, and I think it's slowing everything down. So now we see the red squiggly line because I don't have this people component. But all I have to do is from people. So this is actually .ts is the file that it created for me. And then I'll import the people component. You see it gave me the hint, and then the red line goes away. So when I go to the app now, I see my new component is here. It just says people works, which isn't correct grammar, but we'll let it go. So now I'll open the new component, people.ts. And again, it doesn't do much, but it's got a template with it. And I want to create a list of people to start here. So the first thing I'll do again is import the AngularFire service. And then inject it in my constructor. Make it, actually, I don't need to yet make it public. So here I'm just going to, I need to declare a property on my class. So in TypeScript, it's a little bit different than ES6 classes because you can actually declare properties here and say what type they are. So this is going to be an observable from AngularFire. And this means that it's going to be an observable which emits arrays of any type of object. But there's a red squiggly there from observable because I need to import it from our good friends at RxJS. Red squigglies go away. While I'm up here, I'm actually going to import an operator on observable. And so Rob said observables are kind of like arrays. And one of the things that makes them like arrays is the operators you can apply on them, like transforms. And they have some of the same operators as arrays, like map. And you saw also in David's slide earlier that we're going to do some mapping on our observable here. So by importing this right here, what this does is monkey patch the observable prototype with a map operator. So I can, on my observable, I can just map on the values that come out of it. So to start, I just want to get a list of people from Firebase. So I'm going to say this.people equals af.list, and we'll just give it a path of people. And then this is just being bound right now and doesn't really have any place to go. But let's put something in our template to show the people. So get rid of that. We'll add a heading for search engine optimization. And then we'll go ahead and we'll just create a list. And we'll close our tags out. I'm sure this is frustrating people how I'm manually typing all this stuff when I don't need to be. Okay, so in our list, we're going to make a repeater. This is a lot like Angular 1, except we have that star there because it's a structural directive, and the syntax is a little bit different. First, I'll have this hash here that says person.
It's called a hashtag.
Hashtag. Oh yeah, you can tweet this. Let's get hashtag person trending on Twitter. So yeah, David, can you kick that off, please?
Want it?
So people is an observable over here, and so we're going to again use the async pipe so we can automatically unwrap that. So whatever array gets emitted from the people observable, it's going to iterate through and create this local binding called person. That's what the hash means. I forgot to actually say what it does. It creates a local value or local variable by that name. So within the repeater, I can say person.name. And so I can see a worker, person.name. And then if I go to my app, I'll see nothing because there are no people yet. I actually have the Firebase dashboard open on the right where you can see my whole Firebase is empty. But let's actually fix that. Let's make a form here where I can add some people because I've got lots of budget. I can hire lots of people to do my work for me. Only that we're true. And so I'll create a simple form. I'll use another hash here. I'll say new person. Hashtag new person. Let's get this trending too.
New person?
Okay. And then I'll bind to the form submit event. And here I'll just say, I forgot to do one thing. I need to make AngularFire public so I can access it from within my view. And here I'll just say, actually, I don't need to make it public. I just need to access the people observable. Here, the people observable is special, or the Firebase observable returned from af.list is special because it has a method called add on it. And I can just say new person. Let's say people.add, and people we want to have a name, and we'll say the name is new person.value. So what this means is this input is being assigned to a local variable called new person. So right here, new person is the input element itself, and I'm just reading the value property of it and passing that into people.add. So now I can just type a name in here, hit enter, and it should create something for me. I'll give it a label too. All right, oops, on the label. Okay, there it goes. All right, so I'll add a person. Let's say David East, and it should show up on the right and the left side. Yay, it worked. All right.
I would drop the mic, but I need it.
Yeah, hold your applause. I added myself too, and we'll add Jason Teplitz, who's been doing a lot of work on this library, but couldn't be here because he's spring breaking this week, and so this is in his honor. Now we've got people added, but what good are people if they don't have tasks to do? I'll go ahead and close the console because I'm confident we'll have no more errors.
Okay.
So now we've got people here, and we still, look on the left, we don't have that much code. On the right, we already are doing quite a bit without doing much. Let's, under the worker, do a nested list. Let me, there we go. And we'll do another repeater here that says ng4 do people.todos async, except people don't have to-dos on them right now, do they? No, they don't. So I will here, we'll just assume that a to-do object exists on people, and then we'll put the to-do text here. And so we need to actually get to-dos attached to people. And David talked earlier about how you structure data in your Firebase. It's typically a good design not to just nest things, like to put another to-dos list under the same object alongside the name. It limits you in how you can query things later and do lookups in interesting ways. We actually want a to-dos collection that's a sibling of this, but that can be associated with this one. So what we want to first do is let's create a form so we can actually create to-dos. And I'll do it right below the worker. Actually, I'll copy this form up here because it's going to be pretty much the same. And then we'll do to-dos dot add text to dot value. We'll call this new to-do. And let's see. And over here, I need to create an observable of to-dos. I feel like I missed a step. Did I forget something?
Probably. You
Right.
you close the console, man.
All right. So we'll there's no turning back now. So we'll add another observable of to-dos, and then this will push to the to-dos. Actually, yeah. So we'll add it to the to-dos, but yeah, I'm thinking because we actually want to.
Because we're going to map on the people.
Yeah, I forget how I did this earlier, but
Should have written a test.
yeah. And let's first do the mapping, and then it'll come to me how we actually did this here. So so we want to we have these sibling collections that are like people and to-dos that are side by side that we want to make look more like it's a nested collection at runtime. So we're going to take our observable that comes from AngularFire here. So our observable gets a list of people. So this is an actual array by this point that we're mapping on. And so we want to then map on the array itself. So this isn't an observable at this point, it's an actual map. And we want to add the to-dos onto the person. We're going to create a new list of, so this is how I got the list before. So I didn't actually have to create this other one down here. See, simpler. So we want to then get a list of the to-dos under this person, or so under to-dos by this person's UID. So we'll use a string literal here. And we'll say person.uid. How did we do it before? Key, that's right. So then when we create a new to-do, we'll use this key. Key is a special object that represents the Firebase key for an object in a list. So then we'll just map this. So now our people list. Exactly. So now our people list will have a list of people, and each of those people objects will have a to-dos property that has a list of to-dos. So if we go back here, everything still works. See, I don't need the console open. And there are no to-dos for anybody yet. So now we can add our form. And here we can just say, so this will be a form for each person. We'll say person.todos.add. And since that will represent this path in Firebase, I think this will work. Do you think it'll work, David?
You close the console, man.
All right. All right, let's try. Okay, we have a form for each worker. It worked, except it didn't show up on the left. But we saw that it was actually created here, right?
Oh, it's because you're doing a double push.
Too deep. Okay. All Wait, where's the double push?
You're nested somewhere.
Person.todos. Oh, I need to do. Oh, this should work. Something like that. Maybe down here I'm just not. That value. No, it's got the right value. Let me add another one and see how it does it.
Oh, you just have the wrong key.
Yeah, so I think it's just on the left is. Oh, is it the wrong key?
Yeah. To do /push.
No, this is the right key. See.
Oh yeah, I don't know what you're doing.
So I think it's just in my list. I'm not. Doing
I don't think you're
something right.
binding the list. Yeah.
People.todo. Oh, person.todos. So that makes sense. I bet the console was telling me something there. All right, there we go. There are the to-dos. But hold on, no applause until it works in real time. There it is. Standing ovation. You can't see it on the video, but everyone's standing, and then I can give myself some, and Jason some. So that's a quick demo of where Firebase is right now. There's some other cool things we can do, like in our component, we can tell change detection not to run until the observable emits a new value, and that's actually really simple. I'll actually even just do it right now because there's this property in the component decorator, and if I just import, oops, on library. I just import change detection strategy, and down here, if I say on push, then this tells the component like don't run any change detection or dirty checking until anything tells me that it's actually dirty. And by using the async pipe here, our observable will automatically tell change detection if it needs to run again and update the view bindings because something has changed. And we can also use track by here with either of these lists to keep track of the elements by their key so that it won't create new elements and destroy elements when the observable emits a new value because all the references will have changed. All right, David, my voice is worn out, so I'm going to hand it back to you now.
I got it from here.
All right.
So those are the 3 tools that Jeff abundantly showed you. Oh, and then
it's warm, isn't it?
All right. So what is next on this? So we actually have a lot of things. We want to be able to integrate the router with dependency injection. So a lot of these, you can inject users so they're available as soon as your component shows up. It's similar to the resolve object in the current router. And then we also want to expand more into pipes. So we use the async pipe, but we're considering making our own pipe to make some of that a lot more streamlined. And then you can also query your Firebase database, and we were just doing straight reads, but we're going to look into providing interactive querying. So it does, the API is really simple, and it'll do a lot of the switching of queries for you. And then lastly, we want to do route-based security, so you can actually tell the router when someone actually belongs in that route or not. And so if you're like, wow, that's super awesome, I want to do some of that stuff, then what we are looking for is just general testing, feedback.
Not with unit tests.
Not with unit tests. Yeah. Don't send those. We'll delete them. But file issues, just pretty much like, give it a good npm install. There's actually a quick start we just pushed that'll get you up and running in just 10 steps. And if that doesn't work, you can even file an issue there. So just we totally want to know where you want to take this, and we are completely open to working with the community on it. So that is our talk. So thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you. And actually, oops. Actually, we can do questions now if the other 2 presenters would like to join us up here.
That was fantastic. A couple of tiny details. When you use the / syntax to specify the DTS file in main.ts, is that a bad practice?
In the reference tag at the top?
Yeah.
No, that's the practice. Oh, you mean should you include it in your TS config or in your files? I think better to keep it in your TS config.
Okay, and also the / for the template URL, the apps triple. I forgot exactly what it was. Is that the instead of using module ID? Oh, okay.
I think it's something CLI does. Yeah.
And one off the wall question: have you considered using providing GraphQL as a wrapper around some Firebase functionality?
Not yeah. File an issue.
More questions? Hey.
Thanks. I'm just curious, what's the pricing like on Angular on using the Firebase as a backend?
Yeah, it's to develop on Firebase, totally free. There's the free tier is pretty massive too. Like the only hard cap on the free tier is the concurrently connected users, so simultaneous users connected all at once, and we hard cap that at 100. Which is actually a decent amount of traffic. And then after that, we have our first production plan starts at $49 a month, and it's pretty much what like 90% of our customers need. The only thing you look at is your bandwidth, and you're transferring JSON, so it's not too bad.
And AngularFire 2 licenses are 20 grand for the enterprise tier. In beta, it's 10 grand.
No.
No? Okay.
No, it's free.
Well, Brad and I are still negotiating.
Yeah, we're working on that. Okay. So far, it's free. Other questions? Yeah.
You're going to hate this one. So can you do unit testing with this Firebase stuff? And have you done all right? Because I've used Angular with Firebase 1, and I've always struggled with trying to test it because you have this Firebase object and you got to stub out all this stuff.
So yes, there's actually 3 strategies you can use when you're unit testing. I guess there's 4. You could not care, but not everyone likes that. That's our strategy. Another thing you can do is that you can mock out some of the stuff for Firebase yourself, because you don't actually have to care on how Firebase operates. You just assume that works. We actually do have unit tests on our stuff. That's one way, but if you want to have more robust testing, you can use we have a community library that is maintained by people employed by Firebase called Mock Firebase. That is essentially a client-side mock of Firebase, of the Firebase database that we use for AngularFire 1. So if you take a look at that, you can see how that's structured. And for AngularFire 2, we're using a newer structure or a newer library by one of the Angular GDEs called Firebase Server, which he's a Firebase / Angular GDE. Yeah, AngularFire GDE. And he wrote a library called Firebase Server that essentially kind of creates a WebSocket server that intercepts all of the Firebase client calls and just sort of proxies and pushes the data around. And so it's totally fine for unit testing. And we are using that, and it's working really well so far. There's actually 5 ways. 5 ways. Ooh, elaborate.
Cool.
So because it's a basic observable, right? Like it's not a special thing. Like you could just use an observable and give it a mock observable of data and push data, and that would work too.
Yeah.
Here you go.
And we actually do have unit tests in AngularFire, even though we joked about hating tests. I love tests. Timmy?
So this is a question about observable. Like at the presentation, we were mapping people, combining people to their to-dos. So say when we're adding one more to-do to a person, do we remap the whole array again? And then what would be the the performance issue when we have like millions of say users, and whenever we add a new to-do, we need to remap everything? Were there like other strategies we can do about it?
Yeah, this example would be mapping again. It's not a very performance strategy. Rob will tell you the most optimal way to do it.
Yes, please.
So I mean, the first thing is with Firebase, like it's ridiculously fast, right? And the cool thing is that if you do that map and then Angular goes through and replaces them, the act of destroying the element will unsubscribe, right? So like the unsubscriptions are handled really cleanly. That's why we like that async pipe. So creating and destroying async pipes all day long is totally fine. I think that probably if you had 1 million rows, you'd want to be a little bit smarter about it. I think there'd be better ways to do it. But no, I think by default they're pretty incredibly performant anyway. The other thing is that using that async pipe and that on push thing that Jeff turned on at the very end, that means that stuff's only going to change like when it's pushed, right? As opposed to every time you click a button or move around your app. And so doing that gives you a big boost in performance anyway.
Okay, thank you.
And you also never have a million items in a list. If you do, that's step one, fix that, and then move on.
More questions? Yeah.
Again.
Not directly related to tonight's stuff, but possibly more examples of fork join using other endpoints rather than just reading two files in the same directory. And for Patrick, what are your thoughts about Cycle.js now that you've worked with it?
Cycle.js is awesome. We like it. We learn a lot from it. You can talk about it too, but fork join observables, fork joins, it's like promise.all, right? So that's the best kind of description I can give you. So it allows you to wait for multiple things to complete. It would be useful if you were making like 3 Firebase queries at the same time, or 3 HTTP calls, or anything like that. It's pretty. I could do examples all night if you want, but probably let Patrick talk instead. Send me a tweet.
Well, yeah. Want to see a working one? Check Twitter for the results.
Yeah, so Cycle is great, but you could do the Cycle paradigm in Angular 2. And in fact, Rob has an issue that he created before he joined the Angular team and is accidentally been assigned to the same issue to add the feature as well. So yeah, it's cool. You could do it in Angular 2, basically. Yeah,
we like it.
Hi guys, have you planned for a bigger example in maybe in a repo on GitHub that has a little bit of mid-size application style?
So should we plug Answers app? So do you want to talk about it? Oh, yeah. No, you can talk about it. Okay. Are you sure? Okay. So we're building an app called Answers app, and that's on the Angular GitHub org now. And we're kind of building our own sort of not Stack Overflow, but like Stack Overflow sort of thing. And we're using Firebase in that, and we're using AngularFire 2, and we're using service workers and web workers, and it's like our really cool does everything reference app. And that will be a reasonably sized app. So it does server rendering and all kinds of cool stuff too. So check that out. It's Answers-app in Angular, and that's a good thing to pull down.
Cool. Over here.
Hi, I'm totally new to Firebase, so I just want to understand whether it's a right fit for a recommendation engine or a progressive app. Like it has data, it just queries itself and like gives a recommendation based on the user pattern.
Yeah, I mean, well, as far as using it for a progressive web app, one of the things that the Firebase SDK does that is pretty cool is essentially, if you happen to lose connection, so let's say you users on your web app and they go through a tunnel, the Firebase SDK will continue to work offline, not if you like refresh the page or turn off the phone, but as long as, through that intermittent connection, or if there's like just really bad service, it will actually, the way that the events are queued up, the local user will actually may not even know they're offline. And so it handles that really well, and offline is one of the biggest things of progressive web apps. And also the hosting service is lines up like perfectly with progressive web apps, because a lot of the checklists you have to do for progressive web apps like HTTPS and stuff like that come right out the gate with Firebase hosting. Like when you sign up for a Firebase hosting, you just create an app and then it just lives out there. It's HTTPS. You didn't even think about getting the cert. It's just there. You didn't buy it. You didn't do anything. So yeah, no, it's we've created progressive web apps on Firebase hosting using the Firebase SDK, and it's been really good.
Okay, maybe one or two more. Here we go.
Thank you. Hi guys. What about using like Firebase and enterprise applications like in different environments, like staging, production, testing environment? You need to create like several different accounts, or it can be something like.
So you only have one account, but you can have multiple databases, and then we have CLI. We have a Firebase CLI that helps you actually write seeding scripts and stuff like that, and allows you to transfer from one to another. And so we actually have a whole blog post up for how to manage multiple environments using Firebase.
Mm-hmm. So it's possible to migrate the data and create backups for the production data as well. Like
yeah, you could have a whole pipeline.
Okay.
You could have a whole pipeline from dev, QA to production. And yeah, it's.
Thank you.
Oh, back, yeah, and yeah, we have. I mean, you can, when your data is not that large, you can pull it down yourself. It's not too crazy. And then if you are getting quite large, you usually start to pull into our like larger paid plans. And then on our paid plans, we have a feature to do nightly backups to whatever storage bucket provider of your choice, whether that be Google Cloud Storage or Amazon S3 or something like that. We just automatically put that in there.
Awesome. Do we have one more question? Oh yeah, across the room. Thanks. Good. Here I come. Run. It's a big room. If you can't see us, we're at home. Here we go.
Thanks. I have a really quick question. I was curious why in NG4 you switched from like item in collection to was it item of collection?
ES6.
Yeah, ES6.
Yeah. So in ES6, for of gives you, so if you for of over an array, it will give you the items, whereas if you for in, it will give you the indexes. All right. Yeah. So it's actually much closer to ES6. And I think there's the other one we're about to change. I think we're about to land is ng switch as well. It's the same way. It's like ng switch when right now. We're about to change it to ng switch case because somebody made a really good suggestion to change that. So yeah, it's just aligning closer with JavaScript, really. Good question.
All right, it's a wrap.
Thank you.